Welcome back to the channel. Today we're exploring one of the most pivotal moments in history, the exile of Judah to Babylon. This period marks a time of great tragedy, but also resilience and hope. What led to this exile, and how did it shape the future of Israel and the world? Let's dive into the dramatic events that unfolded in the 6th century BCE. If you enjoy history and stories of the Bible, please consider subscribing to this channel. Don't forget to like and hit the notification bell for more educational videos on history, religion, and culture. Now back to the video. The Babylonian exile was more than just a political event. It was a turning point in the spiritual and cultural life of the Jewish people. It began with the rise of one of history's most powerful empires, Babylon, and ended with the transformation of Judah. To understand this moment, we first need to look at how it all began. In the early 6th century BCE, Babylon, under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar II, was becoming a dominant force in the ancient world. Nebuchadnezzar had grand ambitions to expand his empire, and his eyes were set on the lands west of Babylon, including the small but strategically located kingdom of Judah. But Babylon's rise to power didn't happen in a vacuum. Just a few decades earlier, the Assyrian Empire, which had dominated the region, fell into decline. Babylon seized the opportunity to fill the power vacuum and establish itself as the new superpower of the ancient Near East. Meanwhile, Judah under King Jehoiakim was in a difficult position. Caught between the powerful Babylonian Empire to the east and Egypt to the west, Judah's leaders were playing a dangerous game of diplomacy and rebellion. Judah's fate was sealed when King Jehoiakim rebelled against Babylon's control. In 597 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar responded by marching his army to Jerusalem, laying siege to the city, and eventually capturing it. This was just the beginning. Nebuchadnezzar plundered Jerusalem, taking treasures from the temple and deporting the king and many of Judah's elites to Babylon. This was the first wave of the exile, but it wouldn't be the last. Among the exiles was a young man named Daniel, who would go on to play a key role in Babylonian and later Persian courts. But we'll come back to him later. In 586 BCE, after another ill-fated rebellion under King Zedekiah, Nebuchadnezzar had had enough. His army returned to Jerusalem, this time to completely destroy it. The Babylonians breached the city walls, burned the temple, and reduced Jerusalem to rubble. For the people of Judah, this was the ultimate disaster. The destruction of the temple, the center of their religious life, was a devastating blow. Thousands were killed, and many more were taken into captivity in what became known as the Babylonian Exile. The exile was more than just physical displacement. For the Jewish people, it was a spiritual crisis. They were now far from their homeland, their temple destroyed, and their future uncertain. Babylon, the city where the exiles found themselves, was a marvel of the ancient world. With its towering walls, magnificent temples, and the famous hanging gardens, Babylon was a symbol of wealth and power. But for the Jewish exiles, life in Babylon was challenging. Although they were not slaves, they lived as foreigners in a strange land. Many worked as craftsmen, traders, or advisors. However, despite their displacement, they held on to their faith and traditions. The prophet Ezekiel, who was among the exiles, brought messages of both judgment and hope to the people. And it was during this period that the Jewish people began to focus more on the written word of God, since the temple, the center of their worship, was gone. Even before the exile, prophets like Jeremiah warned the people of Judah about the consequences of their disobedience to God. Jeremiah, often called the weeping prophet, was one of the voices pleading with the people to return to God and avoid disaster. Ezekiel, who was taken to Babylon in the first wave of exile, had extraordinary visions of God's glory and the future restoration of Israel. His prophecies gave hope to the exiles, pointing to a day when they would return to their homeland. And then there was Daniel, who rose to prominence in Babylon as a trusted advisor to Nebuchadnezzar and later rulers. His story of courage, wisdom, and faithfulness, even in exile, inspired the Jewish people to hold on to their beliefs. The exile lasted for around 70 years, but Babylon's dominance wouldn't last forever. In 539 BCE, the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon. In a remarkable turn of events, Cyrus issued a decree allowing the Jewish exiles to return to Judah and rebuild their temple. This marked the beginning of what's known as the return from exile and the start of the Second Temple period. Many Jews chose to return to Jerusalem, where they began the difficult process of rebuilding their city and temple. Though the exile was over, its impact would be felt for generations. The Babylonian exile left a deep and lasting impact on the Jewish people and their faith. It was during this period that many of the Hebrew scriptures were written or compiled, including the writings of prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah. The Jewish people also began to develop new forms of worship, focusing more on the study of the Torah and the importance of synagogues, practices that would continue even after the temple was rebuilt. The return from exile didn't restore Judah to its former glory, but it laid the foundation for the Second Temple period, a time of renewal and religious development. The Babylonian exile was a time of deep sorrow, but it was also a period of growth and transformation. It reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is hope for renewal and restoration. Thanks for watching the video, remember? Knowledge is a blessing from above. You must nurture it to the fullest. Stay blessed.